Hello, and welcome to today's training. My name is Carol Gilbert, and I'm going to be walking you through all of the important items of food safety training for pantries. As we work through today's training, we are going to be focusing on several different topics. We're going to be looking at what's required to protect your food as you receive it and as you get donations. We're going to be focusing on making sure that our customers, our clients, are kept safe. We're going to make sure that all of our items in the pantry meet local regulations, and we're going to make sure that you are able to share that information with other volunteers who are coming in and assisting at the pantry. You might say to yourself, well, why are we concerned about this? Well, there are two key reasons. The first is you're receiving food through the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. And as part of that reciprocal agreement that you have, Feeding America requires that you receive important training on food safety. The other concern that we have is every year over 76 million people are impacted by foodborne illnesses. Of that number, over 325,000 people are hospitalized, and over 5,000 people a year die from complications of foodborne illnesses. So we need to make sure that the food that we are receiving from our donations, from people that are providing fresh produce, that product that we distribute to our clients is healthy and safe for them. We have several groups of people that we consider to be at risk. Very young children, older adults, pregnant women, people with lowered immune systems, such as people that are on chemotherapy or have cancer, things like that, and if a person has had a transplant. And one of the key concerns that we have is that sometimes the folks that are our clients also have other health issues because of lowered income. So we need to be particularly conscientious of the food items that are in the pantry that we are receiving through food donations to make sure that those items are safe for our clients. When we think about key contaminants, we are going to be focusing our training today on looking at three key areas. The first is physical concerns. Are the items that you are receiving and storing, are they free of hair, fingernails? Are any of the packages opened, that there might be potential wood or bugs or anything like that in the item? The second is chemical. Are we receiving donations that include cleaning supplies? And making sure that we keep those cleaning supplies stored away from the food items. Yes, we want to be able to distribute those to our clients, but we don't want to have them with food where it could get absorbed into the food. And the third area, and the most important area, is the biological concern. Here's where we're concerned about microorganisms, viruses, parasites, and any issues that we might have with insects, rodents, birds, anything that could possibly cause damage to the food, leaving a biological issue. All of those three contaminants, physical, chemical, and biological, have the ability to cause concern, to cause injury, or to cause illness to our customers, our clients, as we are distributing that food. The first area that we're going to take a look at with the physical concern is we're going to talk about personal hygiene. Now we think personal hygiene, we're all adults. We know how to properly dress and how to come to the food pantry clean. But sometimes we will have volunteers. You might have teens that come to volunteer who maybe have worn those same jeans for 3 or 4 days in a row. So we need to make sure that folks understand that wearing clean clothing is important. They should wear sturdy shoes. We are in the flip-flop generation. And not that we don't mind flip-flops, but we're going to be handling cans. And this can of food weighs at least a pound. If it lands on your toe, you could end up with a broken toe. And we definitely don't want anything like that to happen. If you are going to be separating food, you receive in a bulk bag of rice that you need to break down into smaller bags. You need to make sure that you're wearing a hair covering, a hair net, a cap, so that no hair falls into the food that you are separating. Another personal hygiene concern is that when we are wearing jewelry, and if we're breaking those foods apart, that we don't wear a watch or a bracelet, that we actually remove that and set it off to the side. And then we'll make sure that we are also wearing gloves. We want to eat, drink, take a break away from where you are distributing food so that we don't have any crumbs, that we don't have any cross-contamination between saliva and handling food. And don't forget, when we're talking about personal hygiene, we want to make sure that we keep our personal items away from the preparation tables, the distribution tables. Put those coats on coat racks. Put your purses away from areas where there could be something that we call cross-contamination. Now, the next area of personal hygiene that we're going to focus on is what has to deal with our own personal health. If we're not feeling good, we need to know when we should volunteer and when we shouldn't volunteer. If you are sick, use your common sense. Don't come in to volunteer. If you have diarrhea, you should not be handling food because there is enough residual bacteria that could be on your hands that could cross-contaminate. If you have diarrhea with nausea, again, the same situation. If you have a fever with a sore throat, that again would be a consideration that you want to make sure that you are not coming in. And if you are jaundiced, you would not come in. However, I will tell you that if you have a hangnail, that is not a viable excuse for not coming in to volunteer that day. Now we're going to talk in this next section about how do we properly wash our hands. We've talked about our health, we've talked about the other aspects of personal hygiene. So the next thing that we'll look at is that hand washing aspect. When we think about hand washing, it's actually a step-by-step process. The very first thing that we want to do is to wet our hands with water that is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The next thing that we will do is to apply soap. And that soap can be bar soap, it can be foam soap, it can be liquid soap, but you need that soap. That's your agent that is going to help to remove any soil, any bacteria from your hands. After you have applied the soap, we're going to lather. And that lathering process is a 10 to 15 second process. And you're actually going to be working up some friction. You want to do your fingernails on the palms of your hand. And how do we know it's 10 to 15 seconds? You're going to sing happy birthday to yourself twice. Or Old MacDonald had a farm with 2 barnyard animals, not the entire farmyard. Then we're going to rinse, and that will remove the soap from your hands. Once we have rinsed, notice we have not turned off the water yet. We're first going to dry our hands with a single-use paper towel. We do not want to use a drying towel. We do not want to use a tea towel because that just reintroduces bacteria. So that single-use paper towel, now that we have dried our hands with the single-use paper towel, we're going to use that paper towel to turn off the water faucets. The reason being, our hands were dirty when we turned the faucets on. We contaminated the faucets. By using the paper towel, we're removing that chance of contamination. And finally, if we're in the restroom, we're going to use that paper towel to open the restroom door and then dispose of the paper towel. So a good suggestion is, if the trash can is sitting over at the sink, move the trash can over to the door, so as people are leaving, they will automatically put their paper towel into that trash can. The next area that we're going to take a look at is, when do we actually wash our hands? Well, many of us will automatically say anytime you use the bathroom, which is a very important time. Anytime you cough or sneeze, and I know we're now learning to cough into our elbow, but we also sometimes still make that mistake of using our hand, so you want to make sure that you wash your hands. If you touch your face, your hair, you mop your brow, any time like that, you will need to wash your hands. Anytime that you change tasks. Now here in the pantry, what we would be referring to with changing tasks is, you have clients that have come in and you've been filling bags with canned goods, or you've been distributing canned goods. Now you get to a package of food that's been donated that is a bulk package. And let's say it's a 10-pound container of hot dogs. Obviously, you're not going to give one family 10 pounds of hot dogs. So now you're going to need to wash your hands, and you'll have to put gloves on. And we'll talk about gloves in a little bit, but you'll have to put gloves on before you break apart that package of hot dogs. That would be considered changing tasks. If you take the trash out, when you handle trash or garbage, you want to wash your hands. And after you've handled that raw food, including produce. So when you go from canned goods to produce, you're going to want to wash your hands, or from produce or raw meats back to your canned goods, you will want to wash your hands. And finally, one important thing to remember about hand washing is, we use hand sanitizer after we have washed our hands, never in place of hand washing. The hand sanitizer just helps to further reduce the bacteria, but it is that friction that we get in that scrubbing process that actually removes the bacteria. The next area that we're going to talk about is the proper use of gloves. We see gloves being used in food service operations, and there will be times in the pantry when you need to use gloves. So it's important that you actually make sure that you get a food grade glove that you are working with. Today I'm showing you a blue glove just so that you can see that there are more than the clear plastic gloves, and it doesn't matter what the color is, it's important that you use the glove. When you use the gloves, you always want to make sure that you wash your hands prior to putting the gloves on. If you have a bandage on a hand, you must always wear a glove. So once you have washed your hands, any food that is opened, that you personally will not be cooking, you must put gloves on. And a couple of things about gloves. You want to make sure that you purchase gloves for your volunteers or in your agency that will fit a variety of hands, sizes of hands. So you're going to need to get smalls, mediums, larges. And another important aspect is we don't want to glove just one hand. We want to make sure that we glove both hands. Now remember, we've washed our hands so that it doesn't matter if we have to touch the glove while we're putting it on because our hand is clean. Now that my gloves are on my hand, I can now safely go to that 10-pound package of hot dogs that was donated by the grocery store or the meat packer, and I can break those hot dogs apart, putting them into smaller size packages for households, and be very safe and secure to know that my hands have been properly sanitized and the food is also safe. One important thing to remember, with these gloves on, even though they're protecting your hands, it now does not give you the, I have to mop my brow. If I do that, I'm going to need to remove the gloves, dispose of them, wash my hands, and put clean gloves on. Anytime that you have on an apron, it's important that before you use the restroom facilities, that you take the apron off outside of the restroom, because there is transference in the restroom facility. So you want to make sure that you take your apron off, then use the bathroom, wash your hands, and when you come back to the pantry, put your apron on. If the apron has become excessively soiled, you will want to make sure that you put on a clean apron. When we think about food and food safety, one of the most important aspects after personal hygiene is something that we call temperature and time control. We are concerned about food sitting in the temperature danger zone. When food sits between 41 degrees and 135 degrees, there is the potential for bacterial growth to take place. Now, it's not going to take place primarily in this canned good. It's going to happen in the donations of cheese, of meats, of produce. Those are going to be the areas, eggs, that you're going to have to focus on. And what we want to do is we want to avoid letting food sit in that temperature danger zone. It's called the TDZ. So keep food refrigerated, keep it frozen, and on a distribution day, only bring out the amount of food that you need for a 30-minute time period and refill your refrigerated frozen food areas on a rotating cycle instead of coming in at 8 o'clock, pulling everything for a 4-hour time period out of the refrigerator. Do it on a cycle. That will help to ensure that the food is staying cold and is staying as safe as possible. When we think about temperatures, we should be keeping track of and recording the temperatures of our refrigerators. Any food that's in a refrigerator, the refrigerator should be lower than 41 degrees, and ideally you want your refrigerator temperature to be between 34 and 38 degrees Fahrenheit. How are we going to know that the refrigerator is staying at that temperature? We're going to post a chart. And every day that someone is in the pantry, you want to make sure then that that chart is being completed. This gives you an indicator that if you start to see the temperatures going 34, 34, creeping up to 35, then jumping to 38 or to 41, it could be an indicator that you have a refrigerant leak and might need to have a service call. We also want to make sure that we check the temperatures of freezers. Freezers ideally should be at 0 degrees or colder. So again, we want to record those temperatures just like we did with the refrigerator. There will be times when your refrigerator and freezer will go through a defrost cycle. So just be aware that if you are seeing a pattern, it could be that with a power outage, your defrost cycle has changed. So you'll want to be aware of that also. Every refrigerator and freezer should have a backup, an extra thermometer inside the unit. So if you have a commercial unit that has a dial on the outside or a digital read on the outside, inside your refrigerator or freezer, you are required to have that backup thermometer. That way, when you're double checking those temperatures, if the outside unit says 45 degrees and you open it up and the inside says 36 degrees, then you know that you have an error issue with your thermometer dial and you'll need to get that looked at. Another important area, in addition to recording temperatures, is our dry storage. Dry storage needs to be between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit and also needs to be at about 50 to 60% humidity. One of the concerns that we have as we've come into the tough economical times, a lot of places are cutting back on their air conditioning, turning things back. So you may find that over the weekend, the building is shutting down the air conditioning system. That might allow the humidity to rise, might allow the temperature in the room to rise. And the reason that we're keeping that room and we're saying that we want it under 70 degrees, canned goods, when we look at these canned goods, if they're sitting in a room where temperatures are getting hotter, the actual insides of this can begin to heat, and that's going to cause the can to start to bulge. So we want to make sure that we are keeping that room between 50 and 70 degrees. Also, our dry goods, such as flour, pastas, rices, the more humid the area, the hotter the area, we can have issues with meal bugs. And with getting donations from the community, sometimes that can be a factor. So we want to be aware of looking at those temperatures, recording those temperatures. The next area of temperature control that we want to focus on is when we receive foods, especially when we're receiving fresh produce. Many of you receive fresh produce either from your grocery store or in the summer months from local farmers. So we need to make sure that when that produce is received, that if it's coming in the day before, that you have a place to refrigerate things like fresh corn, that you have a place to refrigerate certain types of produce. Now, produce such as onions, tomatoes, melons do not need to be refrigerated. Potatoes should never be refrigerated. When you refrigerate potatoes, they actually can turn black inside because the starch turns to sugar. So be aware of that. Make sure that the food items that you are receiving from your donators, that you have adequate space. If a farmer is able to bring you the food the morning of distribution, that actually is probably better for you food safety wise. When we think about cross-contamination, we're going to talk a little bit now about chemicals. have to use chemicals both to clean up our area, and again, sometimes we receive cleaning supplies, household supplies for use in the bathroom that someone might be donating along with the food supplies. Those chemicals have the ability to transfer to food. Couple of very important things. Sometimes folks will donate large plastic containers or smaller containers. Never use a container that has had a chemical stored in it for anything other than that specific chemical. So never put food into a chemical container. Store those chemicals away from your dry food items. Put them on a separate shelf, removed from your food items. And when you are using chemicals within your pantry, and you're going to be wiping down the tables, you're going to be sanitizing, make sure that you are reconstituting them properly. Every container will have directions on how to use it. Don't do what I call the glug method, where you take the gallon of bleach or dishwash liquid and you just start pouring and it goes glug, glug, glug. And you look at it and you say, I believe there's enough in there now. Because if you're developing a sanitizing solution, you actually now could have too much chemical, which could create a chemical contamination. So make sure that you reconstitute your chemicals properly. A very important aspect of the food pantry is how you actually receive your food. You're going to make sure that you use reputable suppliers, and obviously the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank is a reputable supplier. They will be able to answer questions about food that you receive. They know and they track where that food has come from. If you are receiving donations from your grocery store, from a local food distributor, those again are reputable suppliers. They are meeting federal and state regulations for handling food and transporting food. When you receive those deliveries, even though they are coming from reputable suppliers, you need to check the delivery. And some of the things that you're checking the delivery for is the packaging intact? Are there any tears? Is there a trail of white flour following the dolly that the person is bringing in the food with? If the package has been compromised, you do not want to accept that food. Don't get out the roll of tape and tape up the bag of flour. You don't know, was that rodent damage? Was it damaged by a forklift that had dirty grease on it? So that food would now be compromised. You want to make sure that the temperatures of the food are correct. So when the delivery is coming, if you're receiving a frozen food item and you get it in and the box is all soft and wet and you open it up and you can see that the product has completely thawed, that would be of concern. Again, you would want to probably not accept that food item because of the thawing process. You want to make sure that, again, the product is delivered clean and sanitary, and you want to make sure that the truck is sanitary. Don't hesitate to walk out and take a look at the condition of the truck. And if you see issues with that, you need to bring that to the attention of the food delivery organization that is providing that food. Also know that one of the ways that pests get into your operation can be through your food deliveries. Cockroaches like to lay their eggs in cardboard boxes. Mice can chew through boxes and find nice little homes in many of the cardboard boxes that come in. So check your packaging for any evidence of pests. And make sure that your products are properly labeled. You want to focus on, is the product labeled? Now, there may be times when you receive food from the food bank and it may come in a master case, and on the top of the case it might say green beans, and none of the cans are labeled, but the case is completely plastic wrapped. It is sealed. What you are going to have to do with those food items, it means that the food that came off of a run at the particular manufacturer, there was an issue with labeling the product. You will have to write green beans on top of every one of those cans so that your clients know that that product, what the product is. If you receive products and there is no label at all and you do not know what the food product is, you should not accept the product if it's coming in from a supplier, nor should you distribute that to your clients because you don't know what the condition of the can is. You may not be able to tell when the can was packaged. So that is of critical concern. When you look at food, again, we're going to destroy the food if there is absolutely no label on the product. If when we are looking at a can, the ends are swollen, meaning that if I pushed on the top of the can, it would be spongy and give, that can means that there is decay happening inside the can. You want to destroy those cans. If you have any packaging that is leaking, there's a hole in the bag of rice and it's leaving a trail, you would get rid of that product because, again, you don't know if it was pests, if it was accidental, so it's better to, if in doubt, throw it out. If you have cans that have broken seals or packages that have broken seals, here I would want to take a look at this product. Obviously, it's a broken seal. Well, unfortunately, when we do food drives, when some of our local groups do food drives, someone could give you this from their pantry, and as you can see, this package has been used. So you would not be able to pass this on to one of your customers. If, however, this was an intact package and had not been opened, then you would be able to, because all it would mean is that the top of the box had come open. So you need to use good food safety sense when you are looking at these packages. Another item that we have to be concerned about are glass jars that will have lids that if the top is popped up, there'll be a little pop button, and if you touch on that and it pops up and down, it means that the jar has lost its seal and you would not want to distribute those items. The final area that we want to focus on is what we call K-dents, a major K-dent. And you can see with this can, if I hold it sideways, it looks like it is making the letter K. The dent on this can is so significant that on the sides of the can, you could actually have a break in the seal. And if that happens, air is going to get into the can. It could be leaking, or the top will start to be squishy, and that can would not be acceptable. On the other hand, this can just has a dent at the bottom, and that can would be safe to use because it is a small dent. It is not going to impact the quality of the product in that food. And there are many times that as a customer of the pantry, you will get food from Central Pennsylvania Food Bank that has been damaged at the manufacturing plant, where a case of food has fallen or been hit with a skid steer machine, and those cans will be dented. So be aware that you will probably have dented cans that you will need to pay attention to. The final area is rust. There are times when you will get cans that have rust in them. Rust is a significant indicator that the can has been exposed to moisture. This often happens when you're receiving food from households that are breaking up, that maybe grandma or aunt is going into the nursing home. And unfortunately, sometimes that food may have been stored in the basement in a moist area, or may be in the cupboard for a few more years than what we would anticipate. So you want to make sure that if you have cans that have rust on them, those cans need to be destroyed immediately. Don't try to wipe them off. You want to just get rid of that product, because there would be contamination in trying to open the can. Again, when in doubt, throw it out. The next area is of prime concern for probably everyone that is participating in this training. You are going to be receiving food from outside agencies. You're going to be receiving food through food drives by schools or scout groups or the church. And again, in that receiving process, there is always confusion about dates. And when we focus on dates, one of the things that can be very confusing is how long can we use that food after we receive it if it has a best if used by date. Generally, what the manufacturers are now doing, and it's important to note, there is not a universal system in the United States for dating and coding food. You will have 3 different systems that come up. There is a use by date. That is what the manufacturer is telling you, that you need to use the product by that date for best quality. You will also have a sell by date. And probably the best example in Pennsylvania is that sell by date is what you see on milk. In the state of Pennsylvania, you cannot sell milk products after the date that is stamped on the container. Now, the milk that you have at home, perhaps you bought it on the 15th of the month and it's now the 18th. Your milk may still be safe to drink. However, the grocery store, the Minute Market, the dairy would not be able to sell that milk to you after the 15th of the month. So there is a small window of usability with a sell by date. And there is a best if used by date. And on some of our products now, a lot of our canned goods, we're starting to see those best if used by dates, which is going to give you that date that the manufacturer is telling you, from the date that we packaged this product, it is best if it could be used by this specific date. And this is a can of tomatoes, and the best if used by date says February 28th, 2013. Acid-based products generally have a shelf life of 18 months. Low acid foods, such as something like garbanzo beans, green beans, are going to have a shelf life of 2 to 3 years. So there'll be a longer shelf life. Can I still use this product after December of 2012? Most definitely. Is there going to be a change in the condition of the or the quality of the product? Yes, there will be. The longer I have this food, once I'm past that 2012 time period, then I'm going to start to see darkening of the product, maybe a slight change in the flavor, because the can now, the product starts to take on the flavor of the can and changes. One of the other confusing areas are, this is an example of a cracker, and here it does not say best if used by, it does not say manufactured on, it does not say sell by, and one of the concerns that we have is this has a date on it that says September 19th, 2011. Well, I purchased this product before September 19th. I know from my experience that this is the date that I want to consume this product by. After September 19th, the quality of this product is going to start to deteriorate much more rapidly. And one of the things that you'll find with peanut butter products, that peanut butter can start to go rancid. So you want to be aware that anything that has a product in it that is very oily, potato chips, certain crackers, peanut butter, those items will start to change flavor profile much more quickly. If I purchased this product on September 30th, I might think that that September 19th was a manufacturing date. So here the processor is not clearly identifying. One of the things that you will always find with your products on the back is information. Everyone now has a website. Just about everybody has a 1-800 number. Don't hesitate. If you have questions, go to their website. There's a customer service area, or call. Customer service will provide you with information that you need if you have questions about the food safety aspects of your food. Sometimes on the cans, there is something that is called closed code dating, where they'll use the Julian code, and in the resources that you will find on the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, there will be some resources that you will be able to download on how long you can have food in the freezer, how long should you keep spices. A copy of the Julian code is there, and the Julian code identifies a number, sequential number, from 1 to 365 for every day of the year. That Julian code becomes part of what we call closed coding. With more and more manufacturers moving to the best if used by date, even though there may be a Julian code on this product, you now are going to be referring to the best if used by date. You can often tell the age of your products if there is no best if used by date. Those products are probably coming from someone's home pantry where the food has been stored for a longer excessive period of time. So again, that information is available on the website, and I recommend as you close this program, you go back and print that information out. You may find it helpful to share with your other volunteers. But let's say that we were looking at the Julian code, and the code started with 5 and had the number 196 behind it. The 5 would represent the year. So this would be 2005 that the product was packaged, and it was packaged on the 196th day of the year. So that would mean that it was packaged in 2005 on July 14th. If it's now 2011 and you are figuring that code out, that would mean that the product that you have is now 6 years old. That is probably far too long for you to consider distributing that food, because remember, Acid-based foods, tomato sauce, canned tomatoes, 18 months. Other canned foods, 2 to 3 years. If I were to open and it was a can of peaches, those peaches are probably going to be very dark in color. They're not going to be that nice golden yellow color, and you may find that the juice has a tinny smell to it. And that's going to be because of the length of time that the product was in the can. The next area that we want to focus on is that of storing food. Now, we talked about making sure that our refrigerators were at the right temperature, 34 to 38, that our freezers are at 0 degrees. We want to make sure that when we are storing food, that we put food into our reach-in refrigerator or our reach-in freezer in a specific order. And the reason that we're going to talk about this order is if we were to put chicken and we wanted to slightly thaw the product, something that we call slacking out. So you're not completely thawing it, you're just thawing it enough that you can break it apart so that you can put it in smaller packages for families. You want to make sure that that chicken is not up here on the first or second shelf of the refrigerator, because as that chicken starts to thaw, there are going to be juices that if the container is just sitting there and you had a farmer who donated produce and you now have half a bushel of green beans, that chicken juice is going to drip into the green beans. And you can now have what we call cross-contamination. That chicken, if there's salmonella, which is a foodborne illness, present, drips into the green beans, and those green beans are now used. We're not going to cook the green beans to 165 degrees, which would reduce the salmonella. We have the potential that our at-risk populations could become ill from that cross-contamination. So we want to make sure that our produce is always on the top shelf and that our meats and fish are on the next shelves, and chicken, poultry, turkey, ground turkey is always on the bottom shelf. Now, one of the concerns that we're going to have is if you are using a household refrigerator, one of the issues is in that household refrigerator, the produce drawers are on the bottom. You're going to need to rethink and use the produce drawers to store your chicken. Please do not put produce in those drawers and set thawing chicken on the shelf above, because again, if there would happen to be a crack in the shelf, those juices are going to drip into the produce. If you have to thaw food, you should thaw food always under refrigeration. That is the most accepted way of thawing food. Or you can thaw food if you put it in the sink with water, cold water, 70 degrees or colder, running over top of the product. Now, one of the areas where I often see folks making mistakes is they'll fill a sink, they'll put the frozen food in, and they just let it sit there. And what happens is that frozen food actually starts to float. So there'll be part of the food that is out of the water. As the longer the food sits in that condition, the top of the product is going to go above 70 degrees, and when food is between 70 and 135 degrees, that's when that bacteria is going to start to multiply much, much more rapidly. Remember, we said 41 to 135, 41 to 70, we have slow bacteria growth. 70 to 135, we have much more rapid bacterial growth. So we're going to look at this picture about filling the refrigerator. And as we look at the picture, you'll be able to see what the various foods are. On the top shelf in our refrigerator are our salads, our fresh fruit, produce. These are foods that are between 34 degrees and 41 degrees. On the shelf underneath that, I would put foods that cook to 135 degrees. That would be hot dogs. If I was going to have lunch meats, maybe making a hot ham and cheese sandwich, those items would go on the second shelf. On the third shelf of our refrigerator, I would put steaks or chops or whole pieces of fish because they cook to 145 for 15 seconds. The shelf under that, you will see now we have whole pieces of meat. This would be a pork roast, a beef roast. Those are going to cook to 145 degrees for 4 minutes in length. Shelf underneath that will be any of our ground meats, ground beef, ground pork, ground lamb, anything like that. And the bottom shelf is going to be our poultry. Whole chicken, whole turkey, chicken legs, any raw chicken product. If I have chicken that is processed, chicken nuggets, chicken patties, and it's a fully cooked product, I don't want to put that down on that bottom shelf. I'm going to put that up on that first or second shelf because that product does not have to cook to 165 degrees, only about 135 to 145 degrees. So that's how we're going to put those foods away in both our refrigerator and the freezer. As I usually like to say to folks, it's not the lettuce that's on the bottom shelf that gets out of the box during the middle of the night and goes up and visits with the chicken on the second shelf that causes the cross-contamination. It is us who put the chicken on the second shelf and the produce on the bottom shelf that causes the cross-contamination. When we think about what we do in the pantry, one of the important things is to make sure that we stay organized. Just like when you go to the grocery store, you have certain aisles that you know to go to. When your clients are coming in, you want to be able to quickly fulfill their needs, fill their boxes. So keep your pantry organized. We're going to make sure that we keep canned goods together. That when we are receiving those goods, keep all of your green beans together. It doesn't matter if you have 5 different brands of green beans, but keep all of the green beans together. Another important aspect, again, emphasizing keep those cleaning items away from food. Personal hygiene items and chemicals are included in that. When you are thinking about your food pantry, you want to make sure that sometimes your volunteers, sometimes the local church groups will collect already used plastic containers, such as the 1-pound container that they got macaroni salad in at the grocery. Those items are considered to be single-use items. They should not be used to repackage food for your clients. You will need to purchase new containers or unused baggies that you can divide that food up. Unfortunately, you don't know if the containers that they're providing you with, if they were used for anything other than food storage. It could be that the husband used it to put screws in, and even though it went through the dish machine at home, that it is not sanitary. So be very aware of that. Store your deliveries as soon as you receive the food items, especially if they are refrigerated or frozen. Get them into the correct storage temperatures. Those shelves need to be 6 inches off of the floor. Never do you want food sitting directly on the floor. It becomes a perfect hiding spot for insects, rodents. So we don't want food directly on the floor. And we want a 6-inch space between the wall and the food that's on the shelf. So that, again, we've got air circulation, and if we have a critter trying to make his way up the wall, that it's going to be harder for him or her to find their way over onto the shelf. As your volunteers are assisting with storing food, we're going to follow something that we call FIFO, first in, first out. And we all have a tendency that when we are restocking shelves, that we take the new food and fill in the holes that are already there. It's very important that the older items be moved forward and the new cans that you're filling the shelves with be placed in behind. And that's something that if you have teens that are volunteering, if you have folks that just come in as a community service type of thing, you may have to remind folks that are filling the shelves of that on a regular basis. Track what you receive. And it sometimes is helpful that if you've received a popular food item, you want to make note of that, because if you can get it again, you might see if you could get more of that item, if that's something that in your area folks will appreciate and use with greater detail. The more ethnic your area, the more likely you are to want to go for some of those ethnic types of foods. Some areas, maybe salsa is not a popular item, but in other areas, it is used very quickly. So keep track of what you receive. Your pantry might be located in a room of a building where there are windows. Those windows add to the temperature of the room. So it's very important that you either have shades or curtains in that room. Never do you want to have direct sunlight shining in on your food items. So make sure that you have a way to control direct sunlight from hitting the shelves. Don't store food in the bathroom. Again, remember we talked about the transference of bacteria with our apron. We could have that same situation in the bathroom. So you should never store any food that you receive in the bathroom. And you want to be aware, many of you might be located in the basement of an area. And in that basement, running above you could be the sewage pipe. Find out where the sewage pipe is. You do not want your shelving underneath the sewage pipe. If there was to be a malfunction and the pipe broke, you would have to destroy probably everything that was in your food pantry. So know what those pipes are that are running overhead. If you are delivering food to families, or you are having a volunteer pick food up at the pantry up here at Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, or picking up from a Boy Scout food drive, you want to make sure that your delivery vehicles can maintain the temperature of the food that you are picking up, that the vehicle is clean. Sometimes our volunteers will say, oh, gladly, I have a pickup truck. I can gladly go get that. If this is a person who also runs a landscape business and that vehicle is used to transport gasoline, lawnmowers, mulch, here again, we're going to run into that cross-contamination issue. So while you appreciate their volunteering, You also want to make sure that they understand the transference of potential chemical issues if they're picking up and delivering food. And that's what we call backhauling. So it would be a vehicle that is transferring chemicals, gas, oil, and then also transferring and delivering food. Another area that's important to our pantry is going to be the control of pests. Many of you are located in a facility that is shared by other groups. It may be a church, it may be a community center, it may be part of a school. Pest control is going to be important. In many of those situations, the pest control is being taken care of by the facility. Don't forget that they need to provide that pest control in your area also. You always want to work with what is called a pest control operator. This is a person who is licensed to apply pesticides. No longer are we in a situation where we can go out and start buying pesticides and spray them all over the room, because in that spraying process, those pesticides could get onto the surface of our cans, and if someone does not wipe the can before they open it at home, here we're going to have that chemical contamination. The pest control operator is who you're going to call if you notice problems. You see gnawing, you see little mouse droppings, get in touch with them. They are skilled to know and to be able to track where those animals might be getting in and use the correct methods to eradicate the problem. If possible, you should not be storing pesticides in your areas. This would be something that you would work with the custodial team in that facility where your pantry is. They should keep those items stored away from your area. Just like we need food, water, shelter, so do those pests that are looking for a place to stay. In the fall, if you're located in the country and you start seeing the fields being harvested, you might see a migration of mice trying to get into your building. So we need to deny them. We need to make sure that we seal our windows, our doors, any vents. We want to seal any pipes that are going through a wall. If you go into the restroom and you see that maybe a plumber has been there and had to do some work, there's some space around the pipe going in where the toilet is or at the sink, that's a perfect place for mice to crawl through that maze of concrete and end up in the facility. Any cracks in the walls, cracks in the floor, again, those would be areas that need to be sealed. And you want to inspect your deliveries, because often food can come into us that already is contaminated with some of those pests. Dispose of your garbage quickly. Don't let garbage sit in the pantry for 2 or 3 days before you take it out, especially if there is wet food garbage. That's going to draw flies, that's going to draw mice, so you want to get rid of that garbage. If you have a dumpster, keep the dumpster lids closed. This is where you get birds, you get squirrels, so make sure those dumpster lids are closed. If you are recycling and you're required to recycle in your community, those recycling bins should have lids that stay closed, and you actually want the recycling containers not located right beside your back door into the kitchen. Try to keep those away from the back door. Make sure your food is 6 inches off of the floor and 6 inches away from the wall. Clean up your food spills. If something spills on the floor, take care of it immediately. Because what happens is you get very busy with your clientele coming in, and someone will completely forget that the orange juice container broke and there's sticky orange juice. The next time you come in, you might see that you had visitors. So you want to clean those spills up. If you're keeping a mop bucket and you have a mop, at the end of the day, the water in that mop bucket needs to be poured out, thrown away. Do not have standing water. Standing water is a prime area for flies, for ants, for mosquitoes. If you have a locker area, make sure that the employees are not storing food in the locker. It's amazing how sensitive the nose of a mouse is and how easily they can get into certain areas. At the end of the day, your mops, your brooms, brushes should not be left sitting on the floor. You want to hang them up so that they can air dry. If you leave a broom sitting on the floor, depending on the debris that was swept up, a mouse could find a banquet in there. So by hanging them, you are less likely to provide that insect or pest with a meal. Dump that mop water. So now the question comes up, how do I really know if I have mice? What are some of the telltale signs? And I'm sure if you sit there for a minute, you can come up with what some of those telltale signs are. Often the first thing that we think about is gnawing, where we're going to see little chew marks on something, because mice, their teeth grow constantly, so they have to constantly be chewing on things. They like to nest, and that nesting is going to be composed of toilet paper, paper towels, anything that's soft, anything that they can shred up and make a nest. Their droppings are going to be small. They remind me of little jimmies like you put on cupcakes. Shiny, so small, shiny pellets. If they are fresh, if they are older, they will be gray and dull in color. If you have not dusted, you may actually see paw prints or tail swishes on a shelf. And there's an interesting fact about mice. If you think you have mice, if you use an ultraviolet light, mice like to run along the edge of the walls. They feel with their whiskers. They don't have very good eyesight. And unless you know differently than I do, a mouse does not go to the bathroom, use your restroom facility, wash its little paws, and flush the toilet. The mouse goes on the floor wherever it wants to. If you take that ultraviolet light and shine it on the floor, you may see a little purple glowing puddle. Mouse urine glows purple. So I have now officially made you MSI, Mouse Scene Investigators. Another problem that we have is, do we have roaches or do we just have water bugs? And in Pennsylvania, we actually can have either item. Water bugs tend to be dark in color, smaller in size, and they don't tend to have the long feeler off the top of the head that a roach does. Roaches will emit a strong, oily odor. Their droppings look like grains of black pepper. So remember, this is a flat bug. It's not going to be able to give a pellet shape. It's just going to look like little specks of black pepper. Their egg capsules, or their eggs are shaped like capsules. They are brown, leathery, sometimes they're reddish in color. And there are basically 3 kinds of cockroaches that we have in the United States. We have American cockroaches, Asian cockroaches, and German cockroaches. What will happen is, if you suspect you have cockroaches, your pest control operator will put up a little paper TP that has very sticky substance on the bottom of it. He needs that cockroach to get stuck to that sticky paper because he needs to know, is it American, German, or Oriental? All 3 of those cockroaches are treated differently with different chemicals. So that's important. Plus, cockroaches like cool, dark places. The final thing that I want to talk to you today about is how are you going to take all of this important knowledge and share it with folks that you are volunteering with or that you are working with. What we look at is everyone has some basic food knowledge. We all know how to put food away at home. We all know how to wash our hands. We need to move our volunteers, our staff, from this basic knowledge to the correct way of possibly doing something. Are they understanding what FIFO is? Do they know they need to scrub their hands for 10 to 15 seconds? So we have what folks need or already know, and we want to move information to what folks need to know. That area in the middle is what we call a training gap. And one of the things that it's important to realize is we all are able to be trained. We all are able to learn new things. Sort of like training a dog. You can train a dog to jump through a hoop. And we want our staff, our volunteers, to be able to jump through that hoop. So maybe the dog already knows how to fetch the paper. To get them to jump through that hoop is what we call a knowledge gap or a training gap. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to think about, what do we best do? How do we best provide this information to the folks that we are working with? You can do a couple of different things. You can sit down and have a staff meeting where everyone is hearing the message. Hold an informational training session. Post important information on a bulletin board. If you're posting that information, I highly recommend put a sign sheet there so that they sign off that they read the information. Many people walk past bulletin boards and never read the information that's there. Some of the things that you might want to post: at the bathroom, you're going to want to put, how do you wash your hands? A hand washing sign. If I'm sick, who do I call? What is the criteria? You know, did she say to me that it was just a sore throat, or was it a sore throat with a fever? Post the information about the dates on food so that there's a reference point to go back to. We all have a lot of things on our minds, and many of us will 6 months from now look at a package and say, oh, was that the package date or was that the use by date? So you want to make sure that you have that information available. How do you properly store that food? How are you loading the refrigerator? Feel free to pull some of that information from the resource area and post it for your staff. An important tip about training is to never assume that folks know specifically what you're talking about. The other day, I did a training session and I had everyone in the class fold a piece of paper into thirds, like you would fold a letter. And then I said to fold the paper in thirds again. And in my mind, I knew that I wanted that paper folded, so they ended up with a square. There was one person in the class who folded the letter, the length, into thirds lengthwise. So by not giving a clear direction, she assumed that she was to fold it the same way that it had been folded before. So make sure that you understand that folks are sometimes going to make assumptions, and those assumptions may be incorrect. So don't hesitate to explain and to explain again. Realize that even though folks have been doing things the same way for 50 years, there are new ways to learn to do things, and it's important that we understand that there have been significant changes to how we handle food. So some of the things that we did growing up are completely different because of new foodborne illnesses that have come to the surface. And we want to make sure that we're keeping all of our clients safe. There's a variety of adult training techniques that you can use. Sometimes there are videos. Sometimes there are activities that you can do. If you want to teach someone how to wash their hands, use a method that's called tell, show, tell, show. You tell someone and show them how to do it, and then you have them show you and tell you, repeating, so that you're sure that they have correctly followed all of the steps. That tell, show, in essence is taking a demonstration and just extending it so that you're sure that the learner has all of the tasks involved. You're at the final point of today's training. The next step is for you to take the quiz. Click on the quiz tab and either print the quiz or take it online. You will need a 75% or better to pass this course. After you have completed the quiz, you may either email it to the address on the screen or mail it to the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank address. Any number of people can take this class. Once you have received your certificate from the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, it will be good for 5 years. Before the end of that 5-year time period, you will need to take a face-to-face class or take this course again online. Thank you for your time today, and best of luck in serving safe food to your pantry clients.